It's time to soothe, groove, and move those hidden innuendos. Hello, and welcome to the program. Really excited to find out what a sexpert is. Cheers.
Absolutely.
What exactly is a sexpert?
Well, someone who just talks about sex a lot. So I am actually a sex and intimacy coach. So I do have a practice of, coaching clients to have good sex, as my tagline says, and really focusing on how I can help clients build better sex lives.
I think everyone thinks that they're a porn star in the bedroom. I mean, let's just be honest, right? However, not everyone is either unique or has the ability to help each other when it comes to that. Sometimes it can always lead to just being a one-way street with sex, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, just that statement alone, I think everybody thinks that they're a porn star in the bedroom. Like, if you think about it, porn is really not focused on mutual pleasure, and it's really focused on self-fulfillment. And so I think when we shift our focus off of I'm so awesome, this is so on self-performance and really focusing on building these moments of mutual enjoyment and mutual pleasure, and focusing less on performance is when real intimacy and beauty starts to happen. Because a lot of guys in particular, are really focused on performance and what they feel that their performance says about them, about their masculinity, their ego, and things like that. And they might be surprised to learn that it's not about performance at all. It's about the intimacy of sharing your life, of sharing those details of what's your soul look like, and less about can you make her scream in 3 minutes or less. That is when we start to hit points of real intimacy. Yeah,
so we'll definitely go into that, but talk me through the lines of how you decided to wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to be a sexpert. How did you get into this field? It's not like you're at a cocktail party and people saying, what do you do? Oh, I'm in finance. What do you do? Well, I'm a sexpert. So you definitely are raising a lot of eyebrows here. So tell me, how did you start? How did this notion come upon you to become a sexpert?
That is so true. So typically when I'm telling the story, I lead with, I grew up as a good girl from a small town, and good girls from small towns don't go to school to become sex therapists. Good girls from small towns go to school to get their MRS degree. And like every good girl from a small town, I graduated college with my bachelor's in religion and psychology. And just a few weeks later, got the MRS, which means I got married, literally just a few weeks after graduation. But I continued to remain fascinated with human sexuality. And I eventually joined a women's ministry and kept getting brought into discussions about sex and how women can have better sex lives, how women can want sex, because a lot of women face a challenge of feeling like, I don't even want sex. Why do you people keep saying this is so good? I don't like it. And, I was eventually brought onto the leadership team, talking with my friends. I was like, I want to do this. I want to help women have better sex lives. And especially in that moment, I was in this really heavy season of having a young child with special needs that I was homeschooling, and we were smack kind of in the middle of the pandemic. And so this heavy isolation, not having community that I had been used to up until then. And I was like, this is when my son's older, this is what I want to do. And then just a couple months later, it was like, no, this is a now thing. And we were chatting with my friends one night, and one of my friends was like, Angela, that should be your TikTok handle, is the Christian Sexpert. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I ran over and I reserved the handle, and she's like, to make it on TikTok, you have to post 4 times a day. And I was like,
that's crazy.
Excuse me. But I started posting 3 or 4 times a day. And that was mid-January. By Easter, I'd gone viral with a video with over 5 million views. And it really just brick by brick has been this amazing business of TikTok. And I have a Patreon where, as I say, I teach all the spicy things that I can't teach on regular socials, and coaching clients and publishing my own products. It's been amazing.
So what were you posting 4 times a day? Everything that was related to sex?
Yeah, anything that just popped in my head. So those early videos are so bad. So bad.
So is your TikTok page the Christian Sexpert? Literally?
Yeah,
verbatim?
It is. That's my TikTok.
Wouldn't that would have been messed up if that name was already taken?
It really would have been.
Right? What a buzzkill.
Right?
So
yes.
I know that you are a sexpert, but you mentioned you're a Christian sexpert. Is there a really big difference between a Christian sexpert and a non-Christian sexpert?
There is a little bit, but So the thing of it is, my worldview, and when somebody asks me a question, I'm going to answer from a biblical worldview. But I'm also going to acknowledge that you may not have that same worldview that I do, and that's okay. I don't need for you to believe the same way that I do to know that a lot of the principles that I talk about apply to every relationship. I would say probably at least half of my followers would term themselves either atheist or ex-evangelicals because they come to me and they say, you are the sex education that I should have received when I was still in church. And they find healing in the knowledge that there is a person of faith who says you should not have been taught those things that harmed you. Those teachings harm people. And there's that acknowledgement of the church has done harm, but I want to help change that and I want to help heal that.
Right. And how different would they make that as far as the non-Christian sexpert? Like, are they saying that there should be no porn, there should be no Skinamax, what have you? How would a normal 14, 15-year-old know exactly about the human anatomy? Because let's just face it, we've got 3 holes. We're hoping that one of them is the right one. And I'm not talking about the one when you go number 2 in. So how do we better educate our younger kids? And again, this show is not directly about kids, but let's just say we'll call them 22-year-olds, right? 22-year-old virgins walking into your office saying, I'd never had sex before, Angela. What do? I have this beautiful girlfriend who we haven't even done anything yet. What do you recommend? What's a good starting point for us?
So from my worldview, a couple things. I acknowledge that, so there's this whole movement in the evangelical circles of purity culture. And purity culture, Christians in particular get really mad at me when I start dogging purity culture because they're like, oh, you're just saying that people should just go out and have sex with anybody and everybody. And I'm like, no, purity culture is a specific set of teachings that rely on high control and shame in order to control behavior versus giving actual evidence-based education. And as far as literally, one of my friends had to talk to her niece because her niece had gotten her first cycle. And her teenage niece didn't know that she had 3 holes. Like, she's having hysterics because she's like, there's only two. And my friend is like, no, baby, you have 3. And this is the type of information that Christians in particular are not getting. Certainly there's a lack of comprehensive sex education across the board, but it's even worse in evangelical circles. And so what I want to see is actual evidence-based information alongside of, if you are a family of faith, the faith part of the education as well. But historically, we find that the families of faith think that they can only rely on faith, a shame sort of faith, to control behavior versus facts and faith merging. And I feel like that was kind of a convoluted answer.
No, it's a lot. It's a lot to absorb. I mean, because again, you get in the sexpert, then you get in the religious aspect of that. But you mentioned in the beginning that you've had clients come up to you telling you that they don't like sex. What does that mean? Can you go over that?
So in America, in particular, for hetero couples, we see evidence of what is called the orgasm gap. And this is, I don't have any specific statistics on the orgasm gap in faith-based couples versus non-faith-based couples, but my statistics for faith-based couples tell us that during a sexual encounter, 95% of men are achieving orgasm in any given encounter versus 49% of women. And so just that as a starting point, if she's not orgasming, it's no wonder she doesn't like it. If she's orgasming less than half the time she's having sex, why would she get it? It's no wonder she doesn't get it.
I've had this conversation before, and maybe you can help shed some light on this. I've had most women who I've slept with, they do not want me to give them an orgasm while performing oral sex on them. They much rather save it for the ultimate showdown when you're missionary style. So I guess that's one of those things where men are trying to do everything we can to not only give our women multiple orgasms, but now we're kind of finding out that we have to backtrack and say, wait, hold on. We don't want you to perform oral. Well, we do, but we don't want to orgasm during oral. We want it to be this one big, beautiful climax while we are having sex together. So do you find that to be kind of a catch-22, or do you think that that's kind of a bullshit thing to say? I think an orgasm is an orgasm, if you ask me.
Okay, so an orgasm is not just an an orgasm because women in particular can experience multiple different types of orgasm.
Right.
So we can have a clitoral orgasm, we can have a G-spot, A-spot, nipplegasm, so many different orgasms that we can experience. But also, I think that is one, a lack of education, and two, what we would call like a pornified mindset. Because porn in particular tells us that couples should be orgasming at the same time from penetrative sex. However, statistically, women need 14 to 20 minutes of direct clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm, which means that about 80% of women cannot orgasm from penetration. And so a lot of women are culturally conditioned to believe that they should be performing, going back to our very first discussion, that they should be giving this performance that they can orgasm from penetration when we know that statistically they probably can't. And so I think this comes down to communication between the couple, to an acknowledgement of, hey, I understand that you probably can't come from penetration alone. Let's get you there from oral and let's see if we can do it again from penetration.
Yeah. And I hope I don't sound naive when I ask these questions, because again, this is something, I think sex is coachable, if you ask me. I think sex is very, very coachable, and it's always good to know.
If sex wasn't coachable, I wouldn't have a job.
Not to be naive or anything, but does the Christian faith, do they recognize and welcome oral sex, or they just say, nope, we want you guys just to go straight into the sex?
So oral sex is actually mentioned in the Bible. So if we look at Song of Solomon verses 2 and verse 4-6, those particular verses reference oral sex. So there are some sects of Christianity, Catholics in particular, but some of the other smaller denominations, who would say that a man needs to finish inside of his wife so that the couple is open to life, as they call it, where they have to try to conceive every time. That's a whole other theological discussion. But the long-winded answer to your question is the Bible talks about oral sex and calls it good.
And just so everyone else knows that, I did not script this question, by the way, because you're looking at elsewhere. It's like, man, maybe she's already got this plan, as if she knew what kind of question I was going to ask her.
Absolutely not. These are all just things that I have to know as the Christian Sexpert.
What is a pelvic floor therapist? Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So pelvic floor therapy, women, we have the uterus and we have the vaginal canal and all of those things. And our muscles in that area control, like the uterus and the vaginal canal and our vulva and our bladder, and everything in that area is very connected for us. And so a pelvic floor therapist works with women who are having issues in that area. So if a woman has gone through childbirth, I don't care if you think that you have issues or not, get a pelvic floor therapy consultation at least once, because I guarantee you at some point that baby put its foot somewhere it didn't belong and knocked something out of alignment. So they do a lot of work with women like in the postpartum season, but also Christian women who grew up in purity culture are, I want to say, 20% more likely to experience sexual dysfunction than the general population. Let me double check my statistic here.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have my notes on that. But basically women who were raised in purity culture are more likely to experience sexual dysfunction than the general population. And so one of the ways that turns up is a condition called vaginismus. Vaginismus is when something wants to enter the vaginal canal, all of the muscles there clamp down as tightly as possible, and it's shutting the door on the cave of wonders and saying, thou shalt not pass. And it becomes extraordinarily painful. It's so painful that some women can't even use tampons. And so a pelvic floor therapist can work with a woman who is experiencing dysfunction like that to help train the muscles that it's okay, you can chill. Like, this is supposed to be enjoyable.
Right.
So I have a pelvic floor therapist that I can refer clients to as well.
Do you make them do Kegel exercises?
So Kegels are actually really kind of contraindicated unless someone is specifically telling you to do them for a specific purpose, because there's so many different muscles in that region that if you are not doing them properly, you could actually be causing yourself other issues.
What do you see right now as far as the Christian males? What are their main concerns? I said plural, right?
Yeah, no, you did.
I know there's probably more than 3.
No, I get the question. I'm tired
I get it.
because
Yeah, it's been a long day. Where are you exactly? I'm sorry. Where again are you?
Oh no, I'm in Ohio. I don't mean I'm physically tired. It's bedtime.
Okay.
I'm like emotionally tired of a lot of Christian men.
Oh, okay.
Because what I see so often in my practice is Christian men weaponizing the Bible against their wives. Because there's a verse in the Bible that says, do not deprive each other except for a time of prayer and fasting in order that Satan might not tempt you. And so many couples have not been taught to look at the historical context of that verse. And then if a man feels he's not getting enough sex at home, he will turn to his wife and say, well, the Bible says you can't deprive me, so you have to have sex with me. And so he's literally weaponizing the Bible in order to force sex from his wife. And
so is the wife forced to do it because that's what the Bible says?
Yes. Yep. And
oh my gosh.
The thing that just is makes me batty is people are trying to look at that verse through a modern American lens. And that's not what the verse actually means at all. So when you look at the history of who wrote that particular book of the Bible, it was a letter written to the Corinthian church. All right, let's look at the society of Corinth. In that society, they were worshiping other gods, and those gods demanded celibacy as a form of worship to that God. And so what was happening was people were converting to Christianity, getting married, and then telling their new spouse, oh, I'm actually going to be celibate as a form of condition to do, right? As part of the culture. And so when Paul wrote that letter, he was saying, no, guys, Jesus does not demand your celibacy at all. That you guys are supposed to have sex when you get married. And so when you look at the actual historical in the original language, what the words were, that deprive verse is actually a legal defrauding. So it would be we got married and I took your car and I hid it and I wouldn't give it to you, even the car is in your name. That legally that car belongs to you. And so it was that level of they could sue their spouse for false, getting married under false pretenses because it was celibacy. It was not, I'm exhausted because I've had 3 kids puking all over me today. I don't feel like having sex tonight. But modern American Christian men are coming home. Their wife has had 3 kids puking on her all day. She doesn't want to have sex because nobody feels sexy after being puked on all day. But this man is coming home and telling his wife, well, the Bible says you can't deprive me. No, that is not what that verse means at all. Stop using it like that.
So these women, do they confront you and say, I have my husband who is just not understanding that, like you said, I'm with the kids full time, getting puked on, getting thrown, things thrown at them, and here you are, you want to have sex? How selfish. And I guess I wouldn't really say that's necessarily just Christian men. I think that's just a lot of men in general, is that they don't see the picture.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I love that across the board, more couples are having the talk about domestic labor, mental load, all of those things.
Are they really? I did not know that. Is that when did that start to happen?
I've noticed the last probably 2 years on social media, a lot more couples are talking about mental load, domestic labor, things like that. You can read the book Fair Play by Eve Radotsky. She talks about the mental load, how you're dividing the domestic labor in the household. And that's a great book for it. On TikTok, I would follow the account Laura Danger. She talks a lot about that as well. She's a great resource for that sort of topic.
So is that more like an agreement between the two, like a covenant between husband and wife, to where they say, you and I will split the chores, we'll split work, we'll split everything together. But for the man, I demand and I deserve to have sex at least 4 times a week. Was that what that means, the domestic load?
No. So domestic labor refers to anything that takes it that you need to run a household.
Okay.
So domestic labor is things: who notices when you're running low on toilet paper? Who notices when you're running low on hand soap? Who manages the dry cleaning? Who manages Christmas magic? Who makes Christmas magic happen in the household? Who maintains familial relationships? Is somebody sending birthday cards? Is somebody remembering, oh, it's my mother-in-law's birthday next week? things like noticing when the car needs an oil change, changing the furnace filter, who's the name of my kid's teacher, what is my kid learning in school, what's the name of the kid's pediatrician, when are the kids due for their next pediatric appointment. Things like that are all part of domestic labor and what it takes to run a home. And so Fair Play, Eve Radotsky wrote a book called Fair Play, and it's all about how we manage all of those tedious tasks that historically have all rested inside a woman's brain, and how we build a life together and also make it equitable so one person is not responsible for the entirety of all of those things. If sex is the playground of the marriage, of the relationship, and it's the celebration of intimacy that you've created before you ever got there, that's an amazing play and celebration when you do get to that point.
But also it's a mutual consent too, right? Going back to the example, if the husband is feeling horny and wants to have sex with his wife, and then you have the wife saying, unfortunately, I'm just too tired. And again, not to favor the men here, but where do men go for that? Because again, we want to be respectful, but women have to understand, and I'm sure they do, is that men do have certain needs. And that is why I'm not a fan or proponent of men just committing adultery, because they feel like, well, if I can't get it off with my wife, I'm going to go find it elsewhere. So I guess the question is, how can we try to mitigate the, no, honey, I'm too tired, to, you know what, honey, I understand. Let's have some fun.
These men are really out here proclaiming they are bad at sex. They have no investment in her pleasure and then wonder why she doesn't want to do it. Like, that's a perfect example of why she doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that you need to look at, if we're looking at, it's the celebration of intimacy you've established before you reach the bedroom. What have you done to make her interested in sex? Is she drowning under the weight of the household? Do you step up and step in and say, you look exhausted. Let me take over the dishes. Let me take over putting the kids to bed. You know, you need to go even send her out of the house. You need to go have a date night with your best friend. I will handle everything at home, and not just like I'm going to half-ass everything at home and she's going to come home to a sink full of dishes and a pile of laundry, but like an actually clean kitchen, sleeping children, sort of thing when she gets home.
Couples who are newly married, for newlyweds, who are saying, we've tried sex a couple times. I don't get, or it's uncomfortable for me. And then it happens to lapse a week or two. Do you think that there should be some type of communication with each other saying, hey guys, let's talk about this, honey. How can I make this better for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you're learning to have sex together, there needs to be constant communication. So one of the things that I recommend, because a lot of the things that I see in my clients is a level of shame, because what would evangelical culture be without trauma? And so one of the things that I recommend frequently for my clients is what I call a sex journal. And so I have them get a notebook, and I want them to write about after each sexual encounter. So one of them, whoever is in possession of the journal, will write, I loved when you did this. I didn't love this so much. Maybe next time we can try this instead. And then they give it to their spouse, and their spouse has the opportunity to read it in private and respond in private. And their spouse can respond with, I really liked blah, blah, blah. I would to try blah, blah, blah. And then they exchange it and, get to read. And a lot of people are afraid. They don't know how to talk about sex with their spouse because that's not something that we are taught. We're not taught how to talk about sex. And I literally had somebody DM me last night and say, I want to send this TikTok that you made about this product that you sell on your website to my husband, but I'm afraid to send it to him. I'm like, why are you afraid to send a reel to your husband? Like, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? And she's like, he could look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, is he a bad man? Like, do you think he's going to look at you that? Like, okay, let's say he does look at you like you're crazy. Like, are you guys going to divorce because he looks at you, you're crazy? Right? But that was the fear that was literally debilitating to her, was my husband will look at me like I'm crazy. And so the steps, So I have a product called the Marriage Playdate. It's a list of over 5 sexual activities that you go through, and you give everything a rating on a scale from, I'm not really interested in this, to, I think this is delightful. We should do this all the time. Let's go do it right now. And then you compare notes and you see where you line up on all the different activities. And so I had made a reel promoting this makes a great Valentine's Day gift. And she's like, I want to send this to him, but I'm afraid of like his reaction. I'm like, babe, like, no, we're not doing that. Just send it to him. He's not going to leave you because you sent him a reel trying to improve your sex life.
Right. But some men may take it the wrong way, though, right? You have to admit that, because some men will be like, wait, hold on, what's wrong with my sex?
But then that is an indicator of a larger issue in the relationship.
Of course.
But to get back to the sex journal, so many people are afraid of that reaction, right? What if they judge me?
Right.
And the journal eliminates that fear because you're not going to see their face when they're reading it. And they will have even if they do have a, ew, what? I didn't know that sort of reaction. Reading that in private allows them the opportunity to get their face under control, remember that they love you and they want to make this work and that they are invested in mutual pleasure, and come up with a rational response. Right. So to answer the question about if the sex isn't great, it's been a week, how do we have that communication? A sex journal is a great response for that type of situation.
Damn, I could have used one of those a couple years ago. I think we all should have a sex journal.
I do. I think every couple should have a sex journal, because eventually, once you get into the habit of using it, you start getting to a place where you're comfortable writing about your fantasies and your desires. And it becomes this amazing thing that you can look back on your encounters together and see how you've grown together.
Does your husband share his sex journal with you?
We have a sex journal. Yeah. Yes.
And if you mind me asking, is there one of these that you're like, ooh, honey, no, I love you, but I'm not going to do that?
Every couple has hard limits.
Right.
So there's two different types of, when we talk about limits in the bedroom, there's two different types of limits. There's soft limits and there's hard limits. Hard limits are things that you are never going to do. Please don't ask me to do these. It's never, ever, ever going to happen. Soft limits are, this is not my favorite. I don't actively hate it, and I don't actively get turned off when I do it. I'm willing to do it, but probably not a whole lot. Definitely not every time. We need to talk about it before this activity is attempted, sort of limit. And so everybody has what are hard limits and soft limits. And using a tool like my marriage playdate, which is that list of over 500 activities, helps you talk about what your hard limits are and what your soft limits are. Because if you rate something, I never want to do this, that's a hard limit. If you rate something, because the rating system is a scale from 1 to 5. And so if you rate something on the lower end of, I don't really want to do this, but I'm not making this a hard limit, now you can talk about, that's probably a soft limit. What are the circumstances that I would be willing to do this? Are there things that we could pair with this that would make it a more enjoyable experience for you? And maybe turn this into something that is no longer a soft limit, but something that you enjoy on a regular basis.
I hope it's more the women who are being more expressive on the hard and soft, and men are identifying, well, my girlfriend wants me to do this. She wants me to perform this. I'll do it. I'll happily do it. Do you think there's kind of like a cross section between the soft and the hard limits for men, when it comes to pleasing their wife?
Men absolutely have hard and soft limits as well. Men just don't realize the extent of their hard and soft limits.
Right.
Because they do not have the potential to be victimized in the same way that women do sexually. So men lack the self-awareness of their own hard and soft limits in a privileged way that women don't have that ability. We have to be more aware of our hard and soft limits because we have the greater potential to be victimized when those limits are broken.
Sure.
And I hope that doesn't sound super woke or, anything that it's just a fact of being a woman in America.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, and just for women all over the world, and this message goes across for men out there is do not push those boundaries. If a woman says no, no means no. Don't try and manipulate her in any way, because that's bullshit. As a father of a daughter who is slowly going through the stages of early adolescence, it's crazy. So I totally agree. And I feel for women who, unfortunately, when they say you're pushing me to something I don't want to do, and guys just keep forcing themselves, I think is just so wrong. So wrong.
Yeah. And it's totally this. And I think sometimes guys realize they're doing it, but sometimes guys might giving men the benefit of the doubt. Some men may not realize that they're pushing in a way that isn't healthy. And so doing something, having a very explicit conversation about hard and soft limits makes it clear to the couple, this is an area where you can push. Don't push me on this, because it's okay to want to explore your boundaries together in the bedroom. There is nothing wrong with that. but you have to be very explicit about what the boundaries are and what boundaries can be explored.
Yeah, I agree. And you should probably do this, in the beginning, before you are starting to initiate any type of sexual activity, or do you think it should be, just depends on when the mood strikes, have you?
So the list on my website called the Marriage Playdate is very explicit, and there's over 5 activities on there. It is divided into like a mild and a spicy. So some of the crazier stuff is going to be on the spicy side. So I think if it's a newer couple, a newlywed or something, definitely stick with the mild list at first, because like that spicy side can be really intimidating for some people. And like I give a warning in like the introduction of it. I'm like, there's things on this list that will probably offend you, but that's okay.
Right.
Like,
yeah. You can't please everyone.
There is no person on the planet who's going to give an enthusiastic yes to each of the 5 things here. Definitely, like I think it's a double-edged sword, because I think if a couple does it super early in the relationship and they're like, oh, we don't match up at all, they might think, oh, we're just not compatible. And I don't think that's necessarily true, especially if you have not experienced a lot of the activities for yourself. So many of those sorts of activities, you can think, oh, I really like the idea of this. I think I'm going to love it. And then you do it and you're like, never again do I ever want to experience that. Or there could be something where you're like, I don't want to do that. But then you actually try it and you're like, this is my new favorite thing. We're going to do this every time. Right? And so I think it's a double-edged sword as far as when a couple should do it. I think they need to have I think those are the sorts of things that they need to bear in mind when doing a list that.
Yeah. They have the rest of their lives to experiment and see which one, if the glove fits. So
exactly. And as we age, those preferences and desires and things change. There are things that I used to want to do that I don't want to do anymore. My body doesn't move in that direction anymore, or there's things that, I never wanted to try that as I've gotten older, I've been more open to trying and wound up liking. So things change as we age and our bodies age and change.
Oh, I can relate. As a man, I can relate. As a male in his mid, I'll drink to that. So thank you for letting me ask these naive questions that you're like, dude, what the hell is this guy saying?
Not naive at all. There are questions that everybody has, but nobody has the courage to ask them.
Well, I appreciate you.